Eleanor Williams was a young British woman with a terrible story to tell, but unknown to everyone else at the time. This story was full of venomous fiction that had a negative impact on everyone involved. With everyone believing her words, she single-handedly destroyed the lives of several men in an instant. There would be a tremendous amount of work required to rebuild these men. But who was Eleanor Williams? What was her story, and what drove her to weave such a dangerous web of lies? Hello, and welcome to YARO Crime. Today, we'll look at Eleanor Williams' bizarre case. This is a story that will leave you speechless, and I believe it has an important message to share. Before we continue, we post true crime stories regularly, so you can please consider subscribing if you enjoy these videos. And with that, let's get into the shocking story of Eleanor Williams. Our story today takes us to the quiet town of Barrow-in-Furness. Barrow-in-Furness is 100 miles from Leeds, 100 miles from the Scottish border, and 100 miles from the Isle of Man, making it a fairly isolated port town facing the cold sea air. However, don't allow its remoteness to fool you into believing it's a meaningless location. There is plenty of evidence that the region has been inhabited for millennia. This includes Romans, Vikings, and Cistercian monks. The town and its surrounding territory saw a significant growth in population during the 19th century. This was due to the new rail route built in the 1840s and the newly built dockyard in the 1860s. The William family, in particular Eleanor Williams, can be found here on Walney Island in Barrow-in-Furness. Eleanor grew up in a happy home with a mother, stepfather, brother, and sister in the William household on Teesdale Road. Eleanor had a terrific group of friends while she was a student of Walney High School. She was, however, also thought of by many as being very strange. Eleanor moved out of the family home into her own apartment in Barrow in 2019. But during the next few months, Eleanor vanished 32 times, which frightened her mother. However, on May 20, 2022, certain events would occur that changed the course of Eleanor's life. Eleanor came forward on this day to tell her tale in the most public and open manner possible. Her Facebook post details a heartbreaking story that would make even the strongest stomachs churn, and the most apathetic souls boil with rage. The Facebook post began with, "This is the most difficult post I've ever had to write." The 19-year-old said she had been kidnapped in order to have sexual encounters with 3 Asian men, and that she had been trafficked across the north of England, Amsterdam, and Ibiza. She also claimed that she had been abused by this man because he owed them money for not attending parties due to the coronavirus pandemic. She then posted multiple images of herself with horrible injuries on social media. This includes a black eye as well as cuts and bruises on her face and body. Eleanor's story, as one could assume, shook the internet. The post received over 100,000 views, sparked local and national media attention, outraged hundreds of thousands of individuals, and put the Barrow-in-Furness communities into complete collapse. Because the claims were so serious, the majority of the world immediately believed her. Her sister and relatives came to her rescue right away, as did a freshly formed Facebook group. The group gained over 60,000 members, and the hashtag Justice for Ellie began to trend. A fundraising campaign was created in her name, and more than £22,000 was gathered to help fund legal aid for Eleanor and her family, who had long been aware of her injuries and disappearances. It felt as though the world had finally woken up to their awful tragedy. They now had financial backing and a strong sense of community. Nothing was going to stop Eleanor's story from being told, and those who had purportedly caused her such suffering were now going to pay in the most unpleasant of ways. The judicial system wasn't the only thing coming after them. They'd also have to cope with the anger of an outraged public. Eleanor had one critical problem. Her story was a complete fabrication. It took detectives a long time to figure this out. I'm sure they didn't want to believe it when they did. But when they combed through security footage and data, they determined Eleanor's story was a complete fabrication, and so they began investigating Eleanor. However, numerous officers on the force were not startled to learn of this because they knew Eleanor's history. Eleanor was already known to the police as a fragile young woman. In reality, she had been reported missing from her own house, a total of 32 times over the last year prior to her alleged assault. Regardless of the recent allegations, Eleanor also had a very dark and disgraceful history when it came to lying. In 2017, she told a local nurse that a man named Cameron Bibby had assaulted her. She claims he drugged her drink at a house party in Brooklyn and then assaulted her. The cops would eventually discover that this was a complete lie. 2 years later, in March of 2019, she told one of her colleagues at work that she was abused by another local man named Jordan Trengove after he allegedly drugged her on a night out. This colleague then contacted the police, wanting to do the right thing. When a Cumbria police officer approached Eleanor about these allegations, she refused to press charges. Although Jordan and Eleanor were at the same party, Eleanor left halfway through the evening. Jordan had never met her before and had no link with her. It would have been impossible to prove he was guilty anyway, because John accounted for the entire night. And that wasn't just by his friends, as police had actually dropped him off that night, after he'd had an issue with a taxi driver, and he'd even returned home with a different girl he was recently dating, and she was a rock-solid alibi. Eleanor moved out of her family home into her own house around the same time, and this, combined with the dozens of times she disappeared, caused a tremendous deal of stress for her family. However, with her anonymity and lack of physical accountability came the ability to invent her own stories and lies. Several more men were named in her allegations, including Cameron Bibby, Jordan Trengove, and Mohammed Ramzan. A family man was also among them. Eleanor said that he groomed her from the age of 12, and that they were members of a dangerous Asian group that targeted and trafficked young women onto other well-mannered parties. Eleanor's evil allegations focused on several events carried out by various people, but she had no idea at the time that the evidence against her story was absolutely overwhelming. Eleanor claimed that he had dragged her to Blackpool before attacking her alongside many other men. However, this story was proven to be a complete and total fabrication. On the day she said she was compelled to travel to Blackpool, a surveillance camera captured an image of her alone at Preston train station, and Mohammed was nowhere to be seen. As seen in the surveillance footage, CCTV captured her entirely alone in the evening. She had reserved a room at the Palatine Hotel for the night, and she was seen buying milk and noodles around 9:40 p.m. in the hotel shop. An examination of her phone's activities revealed that she had spent the majority of the nights viewing YouTube videos, and she didn't appear to leave her room again until 10:40 a.m. Another surveillance camera caught her again the next morning. The next day, on her way home, a camera at Preston's bus station confirmed that she was there alone with no visible injuries. Eleanor went on to say that Mohammed took her to Amsterdam and Ibiza before selling her to the highest bidder. However, there was one point that was clearly conflicting. On the same day, Eleanor claimed to have been with Mohammed. He was spotted at B&Q while still in England. To top it all off, he had receipts to prove it. On May 18, 2020, Eleanor was found late at night by police. She was severely hurt, with a swollen eye and a partially severed finger, and was found lying in a field. She claims that she had been picked up by a gang member before being taken to a house where 10 men were waiting for her. However, Eleanor's story did not make total sense to officers. They soon found a hammer with her blood on it against a fence close to where she was found that night, and the Home Office pathologist also concluded that her injuries were inconsistent with her accounts of events. However, one of the most contradictory pieces of evidence comes from a surveillance camera at a nearby Tesco, days before she was discovered in a field. This surveillance camera at the local Tesco recorded her purchasing the identical hammer. This suggests that the damage done to her face and body in her photographs was self-inflicted. Not only that, but she would go on to snap images of herself and blame other innocent men for her injuries. Eleanor Williams was convicted on 9 counts of perverting the course of justice and sentenced to 8.5 years in jail. Her lies had devastating effects on the innocent men. Muhammad tried to take his own life after his home was raided and his family was threatened. Jordan has been living in terror and fear since the post went viral. The front door of his home was spray-painted with extremely obscene words. People have also thrown bricks through his windows. He was also detained and sentenced to 73 days in prison. Jordan tragically spent his 19th birthday inside jail at the mercy of true offenders. He too attempted suicide. The case of Eleanor Williams is a glaring example of how far some people can go for attention. We also hope that this story has taught an important lesson on the need to verify claims before acting on them. The lives of these innocent young men could easily have been destroyed as a result of the fabricated story of another person. Thanks for watching. Feel free to share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Thanks again, and see you in the next video.